Back to school time is when many families first start to recognize signs of sensory issues in their kiddos. They start to notice how easily overwhelmed by transitions and new environments. It creates a struggle to actually stay calm and regulated in their own body. The saddest part is that sensory struggles aren't just for a few families here and there. As of today, 1 in 6 kiddos has sensory processing disorder or SPD, and there's a lot of various challenges each and every individual has on a daily occurrence. Their nervous system struggles to filter and regulate normal input, which leaves them in a constant state of sensory overload. And the saddest part is that pediatricians are dismissing parents' concerns because they say it's just a phase. But the truth is that early intervention is crucial for children with SPD to actually thrive. And when more importantly is that those interventions must address the root cause of the sensory disturbance and not just recommend workarounds that might be helpful but not sustainable for a lifetime. As we discussed earlier, 1 in 6 kids are having challenges with sensory dysfunction, and the numbers are actually rising. Now, despite the prevalence, SPD is frequently overlooked and completely misunderstood by most pediatricians. The SPD often co-occurs with autism spectrum disorder, but they're two distinctive conditions because children with sensory challenges may exhibit age-appropriate skills in many areas while struggling with pronounced sensory-based difficulties in other environments. We first need to understand the signs, and even though your child may not exhibit all of these at this point, if you start to notice some of them, oftentimes the others start to evolve over the course of time. We look at oversensitivity to touch. Different types of clothing adhere to their bodies and make them all wiggly. They have issues with sounds and smells and lights, and they don't like to try new foods, which may lead to discomfort with certain textures, avoidance of being touched, or distress when clothing feels too tight or itchy. And it's all revolving around their ear response and normal sounds. They have fear of loud noises like vacuum cleaners, sirens, alarms, or the blender in the house. They have sensory seeking input, which constantly touching objects, seeking to find strong tactile sensations, or they engage in rough play because that sensory input is altered. They avoid sensory input because avoiding activities that involve physical contact, such as hugging, can actually be distressful, and that can also affect things like haircuts or brushing their teeth. They have difficulty with fine motor skills, challenges with taking tasks like buttoning clothes or using utensils or even writing with a pencil. There's challenges with gross motor skills, which are problems with activities like running, jumping, or riding a bike. They have issues in balance and coordination, which creates frequent tripping, falling, or this appearance that they're just clumsy. They have really challenged and poor spatial awareness. Their body is not really connected, and they have difficulty where their body is in space, which leads into bumping into objects or people. They get overwhelmed really easily, especially in crowded places, which is distressful and creates anxiety in crowded environments, whether it's a mall, a park, or even a family party or get together. They have difficulties with transitions between activities because meltdowns or anxiety when changing from one activity to another, and that's that change in the environment, which are really hard for these kiddos to handle. Emotional outbursts or frequent tantrums are really present when sensory overload or frustration is present. They have a really hard time calming themselves, self-calming approaches, and they struggle to soothe themselves when they're upset. They really don't have the ability to self-soothe or self-regulate because their bodies are just so wired. They're hyperactive or inactive. That's where excessive activity or lethargic, and it depends on the sensory input that they seek or avoid, and it's a balance factor. They have issues with sleep, challenges with falling asleep and staying asleep because of these sensory sensitivities. They have really poor attention spans, which has difficulties on tasks, and they're very easily distracted because of the sensory stimulation in their environment. And they have these repetitive behaviors, which are engaging in repetitive motions or activities with their personal attempt to self-soothe or manage their sensory input. Now, you have to really understand that there's a three-part process with sensory processing disturbances. First off is that the sensory input comes in through the sensory nerves and the sensory aspect of the spinal cord, which actually reads information from the internal body and from the external environment. Secondly is that the brain and the central nervous system must process or interpret sensory information and determine what is actually important for them to pay attention to or react to. And that's not important and should be filtered out or essentially ignored. And then third is that the brain and the nervous system then send information and what we call actions or impulses out of the various parts of the brain and body to react and respond to the actual incoming sensory input. When the sensory nerve pathways into the brain and spinal cord are actually altered or interfered with, the brain and the nervous systems, they actually start to look and receive as bad information. And then it turns into poor decision making or poor interpretation internally. And finally, bad and inappropriate actions or outputs are actually a result of this bad information and improper processing or interpretation of the sensory information. It's a neurospinal or a neurosensory communication and connection problem, which in chiropractic we call subluxation or nervous system dysregulation. Now, once you understand that this nervous system dysregulation is contributing to this, then you as a parent can actually understand where the root cause is present for the sensory processing disturbance. Now, there are some challenges with kiddos who are having this sensory input challenge. And first off, the challenge is that the traditional pediatricians and medical doctors are not having a good understanding of SPD and how neurosensory input and dysfunction are creating these imbalances. Secondly, there's no medical testing or even movement-based therapy like PT or OT to actually understand and detect this dysregulation within the nervous system. It's really just a subjective questionnaire that doctors are filling out based off of the parents' observations. There is a root cause for sensory processing disorders that actually escape most medical testing and diagnosis. Now, that's why we have started using neurological insight scans that actually identify where dysregulation occurs in the nervous system, and it helps parents to understand exactly why and where these imbalances are happening, which are causing their child's tantrums, meltdowns, and sensory difficulties. So if you as a parent are already overwhelmed with all the different challenges your child is having, and they've done years of OT, they've done some sort of sensory workarounds as part of their normal routine, and everyone's on their tippy toes because if you disturb one thing, everything's going to go crazy, things can actually change. And that's why with neurologically focused chiropractic care, we get to the root cause of the nervous system imbalance. Now, this specialized form of chiropractic care that we provide here at Maximize Chiropractic is really helping children who struggle with sensory issues. And it can help your child and entire family get their life back, which will be calmer, easier, and more interactive to where your child can enjoy their environment just as we are enjoying ours. We look forward to serving you.